What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Burke, aka Dansway here, and welcome to this massive Minerva hard mode episode. Now, I'm having to do voiceover here, and whenever I'm encountering something in a game, and I have to basically stop live commentary to focus on the battle, because I don't even know if I'm going to win or how long it's going to take, and I'm tired of repeating myself, then you know things have got just a little bit serious. And I'll preface this video by saying, yes, this will contain the winning kind of battle against Minerva on hard mode. It will be kind of done, I guess, the quote-unquote Dan's Go 8 way, where, you know, I've kind of come up with whatever I could myself and done my best to kind of get through it. But I will also be sharing with you what else can be done against Minerva on hard mode. Now, I really did not like this boss. It was the super boss that's taken me the longest to defeat. Potentially the hardest boss I've ever faced in Final Fantasy, but I think I will discuss this more as the video goes on because it's going to be so long and the attempt does take so long. But just because it's the hardest boss, it doesn't necessarily make it a good boss. I mean, people who've watched my content before will know I've faced many a hard boss / super boss in my time. But just because it's hard, it doesn't necessarily mean it's been designed better or made better. So we will talk about all of those things, but first of all, I think it's best to kind of show you how I approach this and how I managed to land the win against Minerva. So let's take a look. This will be edited. I won't show everything absolutely like minute for minute, but I'll give you guys an idea of my thought process and how I managed to get this done. So obviously, as a general thing, as time went on, I started to understand the Materia fusion a bit better, how it works, how to change the type of stat boost that you get. Because one problem I was having, of course, was, let's say I have a Materia that has a high attack, and I want to convert that to having a high spirit instead, let's say. I didn't know how to do that originally, but I figured that out later on. And so I'm not going to go through the endless messing around I did with fusions and testing and all that stuff. What I will do is I'll skip ahead to what Materia setup I had for the winning attempt. So we'll do that first. So in terms of the stats, we have 255 in attack, vitality, and spirit. Unfortunately, one of the things I hated the most about this boss is that magic seems to be completely useless, and so having a high magic stat was kind of irrelevant. So with my Materia, I focused on making sure that my defense was as strong as it could be, and of course the attack as well. In terms of the equipment, I decided to do something a little bit different. Basically, when I have the protect ring constantly in full effect, then it means that when Flash Slash is used, it doesn't disable the protect that I have. So the problem was in previous attempts, even if I was casting wall, when Flash Slash hits, the first one dispels the wall that I have, and then the subsequent hits all hit for full damage, and then I end up basically dying, even though I have pretty much maximum HP and maximum defense. It's just not enough. And so with that problem, I decided that the only way I could think of to solve it with the kind of resources and setup and experience that I had was to make sure I had a protect ring so that I had wall at all times and it couldn't be dispelled by Flash Slash. So this created a little bit of a problem because obviously I wanted to have as many slots as I could, and I would have preferred not to use a slot for a protect ring. But I ended up going for the protect ring, of course breaking the damage limit, breaking the HP limit, and then the Zedric, which was incredibly helpful in getting me to the 255s that I needed. So that was the deal with the accessories that I had. In terms of the Materia, the abilities themselves ultimately weren't super important for all of them, but I had my trusty Aerial Drain, which was really good for getting back HP, and you'll see as I progress deeper into the battle why Aerial Drain turned out to be super useful. So that was one I definitely used a lot in this battle. Second off, it was actually Iron Fist. It's another one that ignores defense, and I can hit the maximum damage without having to have like incredible stats for it or anything like that. And the AP cost is actually pretty low. So later on, when I kind of looked up how to actually do this thing and what was the most efficient way and that kind of thing, I was seeing a lot of like Costly Punch, but Costly Punch I didn't like because it takes away a chunk of your HP every single time you use it, and you're always vulnerable to take big damage from this enemy. So I preferred to basically keep my HP as close to maximum as I could at all times. So that's why I went for Iron Fist. The second reason was because I had no way to have no AP cost with this setup, and so having an AP cost of only 26 for the Iron Fist meant that when I had 999 AP, I could get plenty of them in without having to think about using somas and elixirs and that kind of stuff all of the time. So Aerial Drain and Iron Fist were my methods of attack and evasion. Then I had a regen. I thought that was a good secondary kind of materia to the wall, which I'd already prepared, just to give me that sort of extra HP and take me very close to the absolute maximum. And so those were the important ones. Another materia that I used was Libra, because it was useful in allowing me to see how much HP Minerva had left, so that I could be ready for the Judgment Arrow move that she uses. Previously I had the Genji helm equipped that had like auto Libra, but I didn't want to use it in this particular setup, so I had a free slot for the Libra materia, which I ended up using in the battle. And it's definitely very useful. It's something I would recommend for people, because obviously knowing when that attack is going to come specifically is very helpful. And I kept the SP Turbo materia anyway, in case it did help a little bit with like a particular limit break I had or something like that. I was ultimately a little bit disappointed by that. I was kind of hoping that SP Turbo would really help with Rush Assault and help it do like way more damage, but at least for that particular move it wasn't the case, unfortunately. So this was the general setup that I had. I had the auto wall, break HP limit, break damage limit plus, and I had the stats that you see on the screen now. And so with that, it was time to face hard mode Minerva once again, and this was the first time I truly broke through and get really deep into the battle. So let's watch that for a little bit and you can see how things were playing out.
Activating combat mode.
Okay, here we go. 77 million HP. But yeah, Krista was something I could guard at this stage. You guys have been seeing it in the attempts already, but since this is now my chance to kind of go back over things again, I might as well talk through some of the stuff. Crimson Flare, I felt like it was just a good strategy to just run up to it and to tank it as quickly as possible so I could get back on the attack. And the general kind of philosophy I started to have as the attempts rolled on was that the battle is so long and it gets more difficult. It's not going to be what you see for the first 5-10 minutes repeated exactly for the entire process. And you'll see exactly what I mean. If you've never faced Minerva or Minerva hard mode before, you'll see how things change as we move on. But yeah, as a result of all of that stuff, I was trying to basically attack more aggressively at the start, take more hits if that's what was necessary, but just kind of get through that first 10 to 20 million HP a bit more quickly because of what was to come later on. So that's the general idea. Obviously Thor's hammer is something I can dodge most of the time, and so that wasn't too much of a problem. And genuinely, as you can see, the only thing that was still a danger to me was Flash Slash. Even though I now have auto wall, which means that Flash Slash can't kill me, as you've just seen there, it's something that takes away my Phoenix down, and it's still something I really don't want to have to deal with, because it dispels the regen as well. So regen gone, Phoenix down gone, and it still brings me down close enough that if after Flash Slash she follows up with another attack which I can't evade, then I'm going to die. So throughout basically the attempt in general, every single time I still tried to avoid Flash Slash, but because of the Protect Ring, different to previous attempts, if I made a mistake, which was pretty much bound to happen over the course of 100 minutes, it didn't mean that it was necessarily the end of the battle, and I could kind of take the hit and recover from it most of the time. So this was basically the kind of setup. I did have to rely on the punch, and that was the only way that I could figure out how to get through this thing. And alongside that, it was just kind of hoping that I would get some kind of rush assault now and then, because it was far away the most damaging attack that I had on the BMW. So within about 4 minutes or so, I'd already done the first 10 million damage with this more like aggressive setup, and I was ready to bring her under 70 million and get ready for this particular move. So I got myself ready here, made sure that I had pretty much maximum HP and my buffs in place as well, because I knew obviously the charge attack was coming. But this was really bad timing here. I thought I might die, but thankfully Minerva gave me a little bit of time to kind of prepare here. And as long as you sort out the kind of the 2 punches that you need, as long as you're on max HP, 2 punches is always enough to survive. So that's not too big a deal. But obviously after the attack comes in, rolling away and making sure that you heal as quickly as possible, and just tossing an elixir or something to get your AP back and your MP back if needed. was the way forward for me. So that was kind of the first major dangerous situation in this particular attempt, and I'd got through it pretty well. And you can see I was still in the very aggressive stage, so I was getting hit with Flash Slash quite a lot. But as long as I made sure I ran away after I took the hit, it wasn't like the end of the world. The only problem with taking the Flash Slash as well is that I only had 16 Phoenix Downs. I didn't bother kind of looking up where to find more of them or how to farm them or anything like that. And so what I didn't want to do was basically get to the end of the battle and have, say, like the last 30% of the battle with 0 Phoenix Downs. So I still had to be careful and make sure I didn't kind of overuse them. And so that was something I was always looking out for during the attempt. But it's just difficult. The sheer amount of HP that this enemy has, and the amount of times you're facing that Flash Slash in a battle, it is literally hundreds and hundreds of times that you have to evade it perfectly every time. And so, yeah, I definitely made plenty of mistakes where I didn't evade it properly, and as a result, I was losing my Phoenix Downs quite often. So, yeah, whenever I see, obviously, Photon Feather, the goal was to use Aerial Drain, and that's another reason why it was such an effective move, because it can pretty much evade all of that stuff and give you some free healing. And well, 25 or so thousand damage over the course of, again, 100 minutes does add up, and it gives you a few extra million damage compared to your other options. So yeah, I think this stage of the battle again was pretty straightforward. After you have a few attempts, you kind of get the idea, and it's more of the same really until you get down to the next like chunk, which is 60 million. By this stage, there was something that I'd started to generally figure out and start using more. One thing that does help is that when you do have some kind of DMW limit break, if you do use it, once it's finished, you get like this 2 or 3 second window to be able to recover. And so I thought this is something that I can kind of keep in my back pocket. So if there's ever a situation where, say, you get hit by a Flash Slash and you're in danger of being wiped out within like the next second if a move comes in, that's when you can, like if you time it right and you remember to do it, you can use your limit break to kind of kill some time. So even if it's not actually useful for you, you can kind of use it, and then the 2-3 seconds where Minerva's kind of stationary afterwards, you can get your healing in and recover. So that was something that I started to do, and so you'll see on many occasions I'll just have like a limit break sitting and not actually using it. So it was either using it for that purpose, or if it was something powerful, then using it when Minerva was doing the charged attack. So here, once again, I didn't really need it, but just to buy me a little more time here, I was trying to see if I could get a few extra seconds to land perhaps another punch here. So the damage is irrelevant, but for limit breaks, for that charged kind of attack that she does, the Judgment Arrow, it doesn't seem to buy you any more time. So that was a test for that, and it didn't really work properly. So from here on, if I had a Rush Assault from Angeal, then I would kind of keep that in the pocket, and I would use it during that particular time. But if not, then it wasn't really something that was particularly useful for Judgment Arrow. Now, the thing that I started to notice, this was uncharted territory already for me at this stage, and funnily enough, basically, I've almost defeated Minerva on hard mode if this was the original PSP version. So one of the things that I hated the most about Minerva in hard mode in Crisis Core Reunion was just how obscenely annoying her HP stat is. Apparently, I later found this out, in the original PSP version, even on hard mode, Minerva only had 20 million HP. Now, 20 million, as you can see, I mean, this battle's progressing along. It's been about 15 minutes so far, and I'm getting close to being able to win. So, for a game that's a bit more kind of action-packed and fast-paced, I feel like having a 15-20 minute super boss is very reasonable. That's fine. But, for some reason, for some unknown, and in my opinion, idiotic reason, they decided to give her 77,777,777 HP, which is a 4 times increase over what it used to be for hard mode. It's just, I can't remember another situation where that's happened for like the ultimate super boss of a game. It's just ridiculous. Like, comparing it to other Final Fantasies, it would be like saying, I don't know, you're doing some kind of Final Fantasy VII remake where the general mechanics are the same as the original, and then you give like Emerald Weapon 4 times as much HP, Ruby Weapon 4 times as much HP, or like Penance goes up from 12 million to 50 million in Final Fantasy X HD Remaster or something. It's just ridiculous, it's silly. But unfortunately, one thing I've generally noticed about this game is that I feel like the way it's designed outside of the storyline, chapter and sections and cutscenes and gameplay and dialogue and stuff, the game just seems to really disrespect your time. And I feel like this boss is like a really, like the way that they've designed Minerva is the quintessential example of that. Because in normal difficulty, Minerva has 10 million HP, which again is very solid. It's like super boss HP, and especially with normal mode, I think that's very, very reasonable. And you have the added benefit of // not disabling your Phoenix down. So already those two factors alone make the battle like 20 times easier than it is on hard mode. And then on hard mode you have that much HP, and literally you take away most of the game's methods for doing damage at like a rapid rate. So I have to resort to punches, and this was something I looked up afterwards. I was like, okay, fine, this method is the only one that I could find, and it is pretty slow. But I was like, so how do you defeat this thing quickly? Like, is there some kind of cheesy quick method in which you don't have to spend an hour and a half defeating this enemy? And the answer is yes, but it comes with a massive caveat that again makes the battle really stupid. So I looked it up, and the quickest way to kill Minerva is undoubtedly using Guild Toss. Now, I hate Guild Toss as like a... Personally, I just don't like the move anyway. I think it's kind of a fun novelty to use now and then, but having to rely on it as a strategy or like a cheese method, like it's just not something I've ever been a fan of. And so I don't think you would have ever really seen me use Guild Toss type moves in any serious capacity in any Final Fantasy game I've played. But apparently Guild Toss, if you have enough HP, can do, I think, like 6 times, like it hits 6 times, so you can do 600,000 damage. And so even if you just quickly kind of do the maths, if it took you like 100 minutes previously, but this time you can do 6 times as much damage with one move, it's already going to come down in a very, very significant way. So Guild Toss was like the ultimate answer to defeating this thing quickly, but the massive caveat comes with the fact that obviously to toss enough Gil to take down an enemy that has 77 million HP, this particular person, this video that I watched, they were like, oh, you just need like, I think it was 130 or 150 million Gil to do it. So once I saw that, I was like, yeah, but this is, again, it's just pure kind of disrespecting your time and just making it obscenely grindy. So it's like you pick your poison really. Let's say you're at the beginning of the road like I was. It's like, would you prefer to spend 100 minutes trying to defeat this enemy, maybe it needing a few attempts, so maybe collectively you take 3 to 5 hours to defeat it once you've got the strategy locked in? Would you prefer to do that, or would you prefer to try to farm for 150 million gil so that you can make the fight quick? And it's like, both of those are really shit options. Like, in my opinion, they both suck. So I really didn't like it. I saw the Guild Toss method and I just laughed because I was like, there's just no freaking way. And once you take away the Guild Toss method, there really isn't anything to defeat Minerva quickly. It just doesn't exist. I saw one thing where, again, Buster Sword proficiency, I think they had absolute max stats. They farmed for a very high Buster Sword proficiency percentage, and then they used like a SP Master / Turbo thing, and then they had to farm a stupid number of SP points in order to boost the damage they did with their Buster Sword when they were in the stance, and to take less damage from Minerva as well. So it's like, whichever way you look at it, I saw 3 parts. You do it the way I'm doing it right now, which is very grindy, and takes the longest, I would say, of the kind of viable methods. But it's the one that doesn't require a stupid amount of farming for SP points or for Gil. So that's like this method that you're seeing here is like the kind of classic Danzig 8 trying to avoid farming method, and is ultimately quicker in my opinion. Then you have the second method, which is the kind of make 150 million Gil and then use Guild Toss for 10 minutes straight method. And then the in-between method is to spend a lot of time farming for SP points, upgrade your Buster Sword proficiency to a high level, then keep going into Buster Sword stance and just doing your kind of big attack over and over and over again. And I think that one took like 35-40 minutes or something like that. So to me, like, all of these methods kind of suck to varying degrees, and I don't really like any of them. So yeah, that's the general, like, based on the research that I did against Minerva, that was what I found, and all of them were kind of unsatisfying. So for me, I think still the single biggest issue is the HP. If Minerva only had 20 million instead, this battle would have already been over. From what you guys have seen, it would have been long finished, and then I would have been like, yeah, fine, because if you compare it to everything else you've faced in the game, 20 million is a very reasonable number, I think, for a super boss, because I think the highest I saw was like 3 million, something in that range, 3 to 4 million, I think. And so the super boss having 5 times as much HP as anything else you've ever fought in the game, I think that's reasonable, that's fine. And again, it taking maybe 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, half an hour if you have like a sort of a weaker setup, or you're just generally more cautious and slow. I think that's within like the ballpark, that's fine. But when it stretched out to something this long, I just got completely bored. And it's one of these where, going right back to what I was saying in the beginning of the video about hardness, that's where the debate kind of, for me at least, is not really a debate, because of course technically this boss is much harder as a result of the 77 million, and for me at least, because it does involve like much less repetition, in the sense that there are a lot more unpredictable things going on in the battle. So you have to stay on the move, you have to stay focused, you have to be watching what move is going to be happening next, and you have to time dodges. You have to press R1 at the right time to guard. You have to, well, one thing that was very helpful was having Libra, so that I could see how much HP Minerva had. And so timing it correctly so that you were prepared for the Judgment Arrow was also a big deal. So when you combine all of these factors together, that already makes the battle technically quite difficult. But then when you factor in that you have to do this for literally 100 minutes without making any major mistakes, it takes it to a completely different level. So if you compare it to something like, say, Yzmat from Final Fantasy XII or Penance from Final Fantasy X, those guys are notoriously difficult and tough, but they're generally pretty formulaic and static, and once you have like your preparation and your strategy in place, you can kind of autopilot a lot of the battle, and you don't have to do, like, it doesn't rely on like reactions or fast twitching or having to make like quick decisions a lot of the time and that kind of thing. So a battle that takes longer than, for me at least, that takes longer than both Yzmat and Penance, like this is double the length of a Penance battle, plus everything else that I've already listed, just made it a completely obscene kind of battle, and not in a fun way. So for me, like, difficulty, yes, it's important, and I do always look for challenges, and it's fun to do, and I literally built a career basically out of my interest in doing Final Fantasy challenges. So don't get me wrong, I mean, there's few people on YouTube that enjoy a Final Fantasy challenge more than I do. But when it's done in this kind of way, it just feels very cheap, because so much of it has been done in a very kind of cheap way, where all you've done is basically you've just multiplied the HP by a massive factor. So it's like, well then why didn't, say, Square Enix give Penance 100 million HP? That would have made Penance harder for sure. I mean, it would have objectively been a much more difficult battle, but they settled on 12 million for some reason. And usually there's some kind of thought put into why a super boss has the HP that they have. And if you look at the time it takes to beat a lot of the super bosses in Final Fantasy, you'll see that there's generally some kind of range to it. And even when you're like very optimized, the worst of the worst super bosses can still take like half an hour to 40 minutes in Final Fantasy. In most cases. I think like Yzmat again might be an exception, but because of what I mentioned earlier about being able to really prepare and automate the process, Yzmat is one of those ones that can take super long, but it's not technically or like reactively or mechanically very difficult compared to, say, a Minerva. So the way that they just decided to give her that much HP, I think that really kind of ruined the battle for me, and I didn't end up enjoying it, because doing something this repeatedly for this amount of time, I don't see how anyone can enjoy that. It just doesn't seem right to me. And so yeah, my overall feeling on this boss was that the fact that the game gave you so many tricks and so many ways to do damage but the game takes away the use of basically all of your magic spells, even the ones like Ultima where it says it's an indefensible spell. You can't use Ultima, you can't use Electrocute, you obviously can't use your elemental spells, you can't use Flare, you can't use Energy, and then it takes away most of your DMW options as well. You can't use those. Your Buster Sword is not strong enough unless you farm for a stupidly high level of SP and you increase your Buster Sword proficiency up to a very high level. And so when you take all of those options away and your primary options for winning the battle are punching, Guild Toss, or farming SP and using your Buster Sword normal attack in the stance, it's just like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a very innovative way to kind of create a super boss for a game that up until now has been so dynamic in that sense. So in that sense, I really did expect more. As soon as I realized that it wasn't 7.7 million and it was 77, I already thought, oh no, like we're in for a bad time here. And my thought once I found it was 77 was that surely the reason its HP is so high is because there is some kind of way to do a lot of damage. So it could be, I don't know, for example, finding a way for a move like Electrocute to still do its maximum damage. Like some kind of buff or debuff or equipment or whatever it might be where you could do like 600,000 damage by casting Electrocute. I thought there's got to be something like that because you can't be expecting the player to kind of handle the battle with just punching, like doing 778 punches to be able to take it out. Like there's got to be a better way. And so yeah, once I found out that there kind of wasn't really a better way, or one that I felt was kind of well designed or fair or fun or any of those things, I just thought, yeah, this boss kind of sucks. So yeah, I mean, if your only criteria for a boss being really good is that it is just purely very, very difficult to beat and that's it, then sure, like yeah, this boss is amazing and it's basically one of the best Final Fantasy bosses of all time, if that's your kind of metric. But if you're kind of looking for a bit more and you're looking at it more as like a whole experience rather than just a pure difficulty and nothing else, then in my opinion the Crisis Core Reunion iteration of hard mode Minerva is just, it's not a very good boss. But all of that said, that didn't mean that I was just gonna, you know, give up and not defeat it. The only thing obviously keeping me going was the fact that I knew once I made it through the grind and I got to the end, I was going to feel happy that I did it. And obviously I wanted to share with you guys the experience too, because, you know, that's what this channel is all about. So all of that kind of discussion and mini ranting and rambling aside, still, I mean, there's like an hour to go almost in this battle. So yeah, there just aren't enough words to say to commentate through this entire battle. It's just hilarious. But yeah, I will head back to the battle a little bit more before I skip ahead in a pretty major way. So what I will say is that obviously in the background things have been happening that I can start talking a bit more about now. And the one thing that I will say is good is that the battle doesn't stay static from Minerva's side. She does start to throw in different moves and different kind of things start to happen. So you have anti-magic, anti-material, then there's one where she becomes totally immune to everything, and then there's a heal, which isn't too heavy. Thankfully it's only 50,000, so you can kind of manage and get away with it. But that obviously made things a bit more difficult, but ultimately it didn't really change what I was doing. Like, if my punches were doing 0 damage, it was just an excuse to stay far away and just defend basically and heal. And so other than that, like, what I had to do wasn't changing that much, but it did at least offer a little bit more kind of dynamicness to the fight. Unfortunately, because the overall HP is so high though, it's still like the phases just lasted for such a long time. If it was only 20 million HP and you had like a phase that lasted for like 1 million or 2 million or something like that, then it would feel like a much more flowing battle. But when a phase can last, say, 10, 15, 20 minutes before you get through to the next one, then of course it loses a lot of that dynamism, and it just gets frustrating to watch and see the same things being done over and over and over again as you try to punch your way to victory, or throw Gil to victory, whatever your preferred method might be. So there is one final thing here to consider. The thing that makes the battle even more difficult as you go on is two things, actually. I said one, but there is two now that I think about it. The first is that the sequence of moves and the way that Minerva behaves starts to become a little less predictable, but more problematically quicker as you get closer to the end. So if you are adopting like a higher risk sort of strategy where you're allowing yourself to get hit by those flash slashes, then as the battle gets closer and closer to finishing, the odds of you slipping up, making a mistake, getting hit by a flash slash and then getting hit immediately after by, say, Thor's hammer or by some other move grows. It's subtle, and I haven't looked up like any specific mechanics or like proof of this, but I'm pretty certain that Minerva speeds up as the battle goes on, and the gap between her moves decreases as time goes on as well. So that's something that you'll see over time, and that's something that just makes the battle more and more deadly as it goes on, unfortunately. The final ingredient here is Ultima. So once you bring Minerva down below half HP, she starts to use Ultima. Now that's something I wasn't ready for, so I took the full force of that, and it wasn't something that obviously, because it was the first time I got this far, I had no preparation for it. But yes, she starts to use Ultima, and you saw it did 55,555 damage. Now apparently, I later found out that every time she uses Ultima, it kind of cycles through and does progressively more and more damage. And so Ultima is a very deadly move that I had to make sure I stayed on top of. Now, thankfully, on the fly, I managed to figure out a way to deal with Ultima. And so you're going to see how I dealt with that. And once I did, then that was basically kind of the final piece of the puzzle. And I just had to make sure I held on for long enough and basically managed to keep up with all of the damage being done. The moves flying in, the subtle changes in the moves, and making sure I didn't make any major mistakes or like forget to heal after a big hit or something like that. And so now you're going to see with Ultima, I tried to kind of interrupt the move and it didn't work, so that was another strategy that failed. And this time it did 66,666 damage. And so it was becoming clear that the next one was going to do 77,777 damage. And that meant that even if I took some small hits before it and wasn't prepared, I was going to get knocked out. So again, just like an extra element of danger that would have lasted way less if she had 20 million, but because we still have, you know, just 37.4 million to go here, we were going to have to face way more Ultimas than we would have in the original version of the game on hard mode. So everything, literally everything multiplies, you know. The margin for error really shrinks when you kind of look across the entire battle, because you have to face so many more of the same thing over and over again. Now, this was fortunate because I kind of just moved to the edge of the arena to see if I could basically be far enough away from Ultima to not take the damage. And that time I noticed that I got away with it and I didn't take any damage. So that was like fortunate for me, because it was the first time I realized that it was possible to get away with it and avoid Ultima entirely. So by the time the next one came around, I was definitely a lot more prepared, and Ultima started to feel like something I could keep under control as well. So I was starting to really feel like, okay, this has got to be the attempt here. Everything's under control. I have plenty of resources left still, lots of high potions. I hadn't even moved on to X potions yet, and I knew how to deal with basically all of the attacks, including Ultima. And even when I made a mistake and Flash Slash hit me, I was able to kind of get away and heal to make sure that I could stay alive and not get KO'd by the subsequent attack. So everything was kind of shaping up to work nicely here. And you see again, with Ultima, I ran away and I managed to not take any damage. The final thing I did to make it even more guaranteed that I survive against Ultima was to actually use Aerial Drain at exactly the moment when the screen starts to flash. If you do that and you're in midair when it hits and you're basically off the screen, you also don't take any Ultima damage. So Aerial Drain was like the real MVP here. It helped me dodge the Photon Feather consistently, and it also ended up helping me dodge Ultima as well later on in the battle. And well, it heals a nice 25,000 as well, which is definitely welcome in a battle like this. So what I am going to do is skip further towards the end here, just so you guys can see like obviously the final moments, and then we will start to really wrap things up here. Okay, so I've skipped ahead to 14 million left. I'm starting to really get close, and it's already been well over an hour here, and I'm starting to get really fatigued. Like, I have not faced a boss like this pretty much ever. because any kind of more actiony game that I play that's more fast-paced, it has more of like a, you know, it does involve a lot more melee and sword fighting, that kind of thing. Battles take way less time than they do here. It's just like, it's not even comparable. So I've never faced a boss that kind of combines together so many different elements for such a long period of time, and it's really not even close. Hard mode Minerva is an absolute different kind of beast compared to anything I've faced, well, in the game and in Final Fantasy history, pretty much. So it's really interesting to me that it ended up that way. But you can see, I mean, I'm in the groove here. I've been doing this for over an hour now, trying to stay cautious because the patterns are changing all the time. Flash Slash is starting to come at different times, and you saw right there, it did 2 Flash Slashes in a row. So that's the kind of situation where you can definitely take an unwanted hit and end up dying. So I just have to be more and more careful every single time. And unfortunately, of course, as you get nearer the end, Flash Slash starts to happen more and more. So you really have to stay vigilant all the damn time. It's really unforgiving. That was the aerial drain there, and immediately followed up the Ultima with the Thor's Hammer. So what changes when you get nearer the end is there's a lot more back-to-backs, and you can really get caught out more easily by those back-to-backs because the damage is just so huge that all it takes is for one back-to-back to happen and you can be permanently KO'd. So here, because I got hit by a Flash Slash earlier, I got my Phoenix Down taken away, but I made sure I got it back. And I was looking good here. It was getting more fast and furious and much more dangerous with every passing minute. You can see 2 Flash Slashes in a row, and this was the 3rd. So that was just horrible. With time, you do start to get a feel for certain combinations. So like this double Flash Slash definitely wasn't happening earlier on. But after you've faced a few of them, you start to realize that in this particular phase, there is a chance it can do them back to back. So it's something you try to be more wary of as you go. But this time it's not going to follow it up with one. So this is what I mean by kind of locking down exactly what's going to happen and when is definitely difficult because it just keeps switching. But you do pick up on some patterns as you go, and it does help you to kind of evade certain moves. But honestly, in the end, it turned out that Krista and Crimson Flare were basically the 2 moves that were most beneficial for me. So this Flash Slash almost killed me because it followed it up immediately after a big move, basically. So you can see, I mean, Ultima, Flash Slash immediately afterwards, Flash Slash again. It's just getting really horrific now, and I'm on the edge. I'm really on the ragged edge here. And I've still got 12 million to go, by the way. I mean, the HP remaining is over half of what it originally was in hard mode, in Crisis Core. It's just absolutely wild, it really is. But it's like you have to still keep doing damage, so you have to keep going towards it and taking the risk. It's like you don't have a choice, man. Otherwise the battle's going to take forever. So you have to keep going. So another Flash Slash coming in. I tried to go in, got my hit, got back out. Crimson Flare, I was ready for this one. Tank it, make a hit. Crimson Flare again, tank it, make a hit. I was generally in sync with everything here, but Flash Slash came in. For a second time. Was ready for it. Then the 3rd Flash Slash came in. I was trying to recover, and Thor's Hammer took me out. Yeah. This was about, I would say, an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 20 minutes, something like that, that I was messing around here trying to win. And that was pretty crushing.